want you to trust me. I'm going to take care of you. And she was hearing this, and she was trying to deal with it. And then the guy shows up, and he asks her for her last bit of bread and oil, and she just falls apart and says, "You don't understand. How could you be this callous?" She's really talking to God, isn't she? "You're asking me to give this up? This is all I've got. No more luxury. I mean, there is no luxury to my life anymore. There's no extras. This is it." A prophet and a widow both heard from God. God asked them both to sacrifice everything and be willing to lay it on the line. And he kept Elijah alive with a creek and some crows. And he kept this woman alive, and Elijah, and her son, with a never-ending flower bowl. Do you hear from God? I mean, seriously, do you ever hear God tell you to do things? Don't answer me, just think about it. When was the last time you heard God tell you to do something? Church, let me tell you something. We are supposed to be a group of people that hear God speak to us. The problem with us is we expect the preacher to hear from God, and we come to church to hear what God told the preacher. Listen, if God has to go outside to some other community that doesn't even believe in Him, He's looking for people that will listen to Him. And I don't like what God says. If He just told me what I wanted to hear, well, let me put it like this. If I only read what I want to hear, I can be a rich, selfish, arrogant, self-serving human being. But this God that speaks to the prophets and the God that speaks to us today is a God that asks us to do things that don't make sense. And brothers and sisters, if your life is one sensible decision after another because you've balanced it with your common sense and your checkbook, you are not hearing from God. Yeah, but God gave me common sense. Well, sure He did. He gave Elijah some common sense too, didn't He? Are you hearing from God? The problem with hearing from God is He really speaks to us because He wants us to obey Him. Did you know that? He doesn't speak to you just so that He can write it down. You know, I talked with Mike today. He pretty much ignored me, but at least he listened. He didn't do what I wanted him to do. God speaks to us because He wants us to obey Him. And it's such a battle because I don't know about you, but my life is so full of distractions and it's so full of noise. and it's so full of a schedule and a constant activity and something going all the time, and somebody always crying for my attention. Is your life like that, or is it just me? It's like, God, I ain't got time to listen to you. What you talking about? Well, I can't do that. God, that doesn't make any sense. I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. I don't have the skills. God, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm ignoring you. and the more you ignore God, the quieter He gets. There was and I don't have it. I was thinking about it when you were talking earlier, Jesse. There was a song that we used to sing. It was a hymn in Alberta Methodist Church when I grew up. And the chorus went like this. Trust and obey. Because there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. You know, and I wonder, maybe part of the reason our Christianity is so dull and boring and lifeless is because we don't trust and we don't obey. So do you hear from God? That's the first step. If you're not hearing from God, that's a problem. that's a key, you know, and it's a basic question. We'll talk about that a little tonight. Now, how do I hear from God? Well, He's speaking all the time. You just got to get tuned in. And then God may ask you, like Jesus asked the rich young ruler, hey, look, you know what? Here's the issue. Go sell it all and come follow me. Hope He doesn't ask me to do that. Anybody hope He doesn't ask me to do that neither? He might. The rich young ruler couldn't handle it. You know, like, forget that. He may say something like, look, just sign up to help with the nursery. Why don't you teach a class? Why don't you adopt someone? Or why don't you mentor someone? Or why don't you give $1,000? You know, I don't know what God is telling you to do. I don't know what God is speaking to you. I can very rarely speak from God to you. I try. But you've got to be listening to God yourself. So do you hear God? Maybe you've heard Him and you just don't trust Him. Because the things that He's asking you to do don't make sense. The budget doesn't pan out. The bottom dollar is not there. It just doesn't make sense. Let me tell you something. That's probably the way you can say that's got to be God. It's got to be God when it doesn't make sense. And maybe it's just obedience, man. I'm the worst one. Not just doing what He says. You know, I have hard enough time just not doing what I know is wrong. Anybody? I just have a hard enough time behaving myself, much less getting up and doing what God wants me to do. Maybe that's it for you. I don't know. Pray with me. Father, you are you're moving around in our hearts, and you're convicting us. You're convicting me. Lord, I know there are so many days that I live out and I never stop and listen for you or to you. And I totally miss you. Lord, would you call us? I mean, you've called us since the earliest days, since creation all the way to the end of the book. Lord, you have called us to be quiet. You have called us away and apart to humble ourselves and to listen for you. God, we are so spoiled in America. Every one of us has a dozen Bibles at home. And you speak every day, all day through your word. We don't even read it. Father, forgive us. Lord, I pray that this idea of me being the man of God would disappear. Lord, that this idea of me being the only prophet in this place would fade away. God, I pray that you would awaken us to the fact that you are speaking to every person in this room. Lord, that you have gifted and equipped and called each one of us into places where we don't even think you are, to do something that only we can do. Some of us have heard that very clearly, and we've stepped over there and then we've stepped back. God, forgive us. Some of us are trying to figure out how to make it make sense. God, help us to trust you. Meet us in these moments, Father. Call to our hearts once again. Open our spiritual ears and our spiritual eyes.